Have you ever wondered why the image of a woman turning silently away leaves a man more shattered than the loudest scream or the fiercest accusation? Why her calm withdrawal burns deeper than fury, cutting through his pride with invisible precision? The truth lies in something Carl Jung once described as the shadow of the feminine, the archetypal power that awakens within a man when he confronts not her words but her absence. Anger he can fight, defend against, rationalize. Silence, however, is unanswerable. It pierces the ego like a mirror, reflecting back everything he cannot control. A woman who walks away without anger embodies a kind of danger few men can name, yet every man can feel. She denies him the story he desperately seeks, the shouting, the pleading, the drama that would confirm he still has a place in her inner world. Instead, she leaves him alone with his thoughts, and in that solitude, he meets his own shadow. Jung believed the shadow was the hidden part of the psyche, the dark twin of the conscious self, carrying all that we repress. For a man, the sudden silence of a woman awakens this confrontation. He cannot project onto her anymore. He cannot use her energy to shield himself from what festers inside. He is forced to look inward, and for many, that confrontation is unbearable. You see, when a woman departs without rage, she is not abandoning the battlefield, she is dissolving it. The war he thought he was fighting vanishes, leaving him alone with weapons in his hand but no enemy to strike. And in that moment, his ego collapses under the weight of its own illusions. What was once a game of dominance or neglect suddenly becomes a haunting emptiness. He begins to wonder, what did I mean to her? Did I matter at all? Why did she not fight for me, for us? This is where the danger lies, because a calm departure plants seeds of obsession, the human sigh. She resists incompleteness. A man will replay her silence in his mind endlessly, like a riddle without solution. Anger is final, it gives closure. Silence is eternal, it lingers in the unconscious as unfinished business. And so, the woman who leaves without anger wields an archetypal power. She becomes the anima, the feminine spirit Jung spoke of, forever dwelling in a man's psyche as a figure both desired and feared. But why does this calm detachment possess such beauty? Because it reflects individuation, the process Jung described as the highest goal of the soul. To become whole, no longer chained by the compulsion to prove or justify. A woman who leaves without anger is no longer trapped in the cycle of reaction. She has transcended the battlefield of validation and rejection. Her silence is not empty, it is full of self-possession. It says, I do not need to wound you to free myself. My freedom itself is enough. For the man, this is unbearable because it dismantles his sense of control. He cannot say she is bitter, nor can he paint himself as the victim of her wrath. He is left instead with the truth. She simply walked away because she no longer needed what he offered, and that realization touches the deepest wound of the male psyche, the fear of being unnecessary. Seneca once wrote that true strength lies in needing less, not more. When a woman embodies this philosophy, she reveals a beauty far more dangerous than any weapon of seduction, the beauty of not needing to conquer or be conquered. You may not realize the magnitude of this power until you embody it yourself. Think of the times you argued, explained, pleaded, pouring your energy into convincing someone to value what you already are. Did it make them respect you more, or did it only feed their sense of control? And now imagine the opposite, withdrawing without a word, carrying your essence away like a flame removed from a room. Suddenly the air grows colder for them. Suddenly your absence speaks louder than every plea ever could. This is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is the moment a woman chooses herself over the endless performance of convincing someone else. Jung would call this a step toward individuation, the integration of shadow and light, strength and softness, rage and calm. To walk away without anger means the shadow has been acknowledged, but not unleashed destructively. It means the fire burns inward now, illuminating the self instead of scorching another. The beauty in this lies not only in how it affects the man left behind, but in what it awakens in the woman herself. She begins to see that her power was never in persuading or in fighting, but in the quiet sovereignty of knowing she is whole with or without him. This realization changes everything, for once the need to be understood or validated dissolves, she is untouchable, and so the man, caught in the echo of her silence, feels both desire and dread. He wants to pull her back, yet he knows he cannot. He longs for her attention, yet he knows it no longer belongs to him. She has become a figure both real and mythic, not the woman he left behind, but the archetype of all women he will never fully possess. When a woman departs without anger, the echoes of her silence ripple through a man's inner world like thunder rolling through an empty valley. He finds himself haunted not by her presence, but by the absence of her energy. That stillness, that calm departure, forces him into a confrontation with truths he has long buried beneath bravado and noise. Jung would call this the surfacing of the unconscious, the moment when the mask of the persona cracks and the shadow slips through. Men often believe they hold power so long as they can provoke, dominate, or dismiss. Yet the instant she withdraws her light without resistance, his power evaporates. Anger could have confirmed his importance. Her pleas would have reassured him of his value. But silence leaves him stripped bare. He begins to realize he was not the one dismissing her. She was the one tolerating him. That reversal destabilizes his ego. For many men, it becomes the seed of regret, gnawing at them long after she has vanished from their lives. This is the paradox. The more quietly a woman leaves, the louder her absence becomes. He notices it in the smallest of places, in the quiet of his mornings, in the echoes of his nights, in the subtle emptiness when he reaches for validation and finds none. Every man, no matter how stoic or proud, carries within him the fear of being forgotten. To be left behind without anger is to be erased without a fight. It is not just rejection, it is annihilation of the role he believed he played in her story. For the woman, this detachment represents a profound psychological awakening. She has walked through the fire of explaining, of waiting, of hoping he might awaken to her value. And finally she realizes the truth. The energy she wasted in convincing was a mirror of her own shadow, the part of her that still feared abandonment. By choosing silence, she transcends that shadow. She no longer performs for his recognition, she embodies her own. This is individuation, the movement toward wholeness Jung wrote of, where a person integrates their wounds into strength. Do you see the shift here? When you walk away calmly, without the smoke of anger trailing behind you, you cease being a character in his drama. You step out of the role entirely, and in doing so you reveal the deeper wound, his dependence on you for validation, for identity, for ego supply. That revelation terrifies him because it shows him the emptiness of his own foundation. He was never the master of the story. He was clinging to your... Think of how the Stoics taught detachment. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the best revenge is not to resemble the one who wronged you. In walking away without anger, you embody this philosophy. You do not mirror his neglect or his cruelty. You choose serenity. You reveal that his actions do not dictate your being. This indifference is not apathy, it is power. It says, you cannot touch what I have made whole within myself. And yet, paradoxically, this is precisely what ensnares him. He cannot forget the woman who does not need him. He cannot stop replaying the mystery of why she did not rage, why she did not collapse into pleas. That mystery becomes an endless loop in his mind, an obsession. For anger can be dismissed as emotion, but calm detachment cannot be rationalized away. It carries an aura of finality, a spiritual closing of the door. The more he tries to explain it to himself, the more he spirals. Was she ever truly attached to him, or was she simply beyond his grasp from the beginning? Did he ever hold her, or was he merely holding the shadow of what he thought she was? These questions torment him because they strip him of certainty, and men fear uncertainty more than they fear loss. Loss is tangible, uncertainty is eternal. The woman, however, begins to breathe differently. She no longer waits for closure from him because her act of walking away was the closure. She no longer needs his recognition because her silence has already spoken the truth. She is beyond his reach, not because he pushed her away, but because she rose higher than the battlefield itself. This is the dangerous beauty Jung alluded to. The feminine spirit that once awakened no longer plays the game of approval. There is a serenity in her now, one that cannot be shaken by his absence or his longing. She realizes her strength was never in how tightly she could hold him, but in how gracefully she could release him. And in that release, she discovers a paradoxical freedom. The less she fights to be chosen, the more radiant she becomes. Men sense this radiance even from afar. It lingers in their memories, it haunts their dreams, it unsettles their pride. They may never confess it aloud, but deep within, they know the calmest exit is the one that wounds the deepest. And the woman who can walk away without anger is no longer just a memory. She becomes a symbol, a haunting presence that reshapes how he views every woman after her. What unsettles a man most is not the loss of her presence, but the realization that her absence does not orbit around him. When a woman walks away without anger, she is no longer tethered by invisible strings of resentment or longing. She has cut the threads completely, and in that detachment she embodies what Jung described as the anima freed, the soul image unchained from projection. She becomes more than flesh and memory, she becomes myth. For the man, this myth is unbearable. He clings to logic, to excuses, to rationalizations, anything to preserve his ego. Yet the silence of her departure resists explanation. He cannot reduce it to hysteria, cannot dismiss it as weakness, cannot comfort himself by imagining she still burns with unspoken rage. Instead, he must face the brutal truth. She was strong enough to choose herself over the need for his acknowledgement. And this strikes him at the core of his being because it unmasks the dependency he concealed beneath pride. Most men carry within them a silent terror, the fear of being replaceable, of being unessential. When she departs without anger, that fear materializes. She has proven, by her very calm, that he was not the axis of her world, he was an experience, not a destiny, and while he may try to drown this truth in distractions, it resurfaces in quiet hours, gnawing at the edges of his mind. For the woman, this act of walking away is more than strategy. It is a rite of passage. She steps beyond the realm of validation seeking, entering the sacred space of individuation. The Stoics called this inner citadel, the fortress of the soul that no external storm can breach. To walk away without anger is to inhabit this fortress fully. It is to say, I am not defined by your blindness, nor diminished by your neglect. My worth is not negotiable, and my silence is my crown. Do you understand the gravity of this power? When you no longer need to shout your worth, when you no longer beg to be seen, you enter the realm of true sovereignty. The man may think he lost a woman, but what he truly lost was access to the radiant energy that once anchored him. And here lies the paradox. The moment you release him, he feels the weight of your absence more intensely than he ever felt the warmth of your presence. This is because silence awakens projection. Jung explained that when the conscious mind encounters a void, the unconscious rushes to fill it. Your calm detachment becomes a blank screen onto which he casts every insecurity, every regret, every fantasy. He wonders if you are happier without him, if another man has replaced him, if he ever truly mattered. These unanswered questions ferment into obsession because the unconscious cannot rest without resolution. Meanwhile, you rise. No longer chained to his gaze, you begin to reclaim your own reflection. You rediscover the softness of your solitude, the strength in your independence, the pleasure of being whole. This is not bitterness, it is rebirth. By leaving without anger, you did not escape him, you returned to yourself. Consider what Epictetus taught. Freedom is found not in controlling others, but in controlling oneself. By mastering the impulse to rage, to beg, to explain, you have exercised the highest form of freedom. You chose restraint, not as weakness, but as proof of your command over your own spirit. And this choice creates an aura around you, a dangerous beauty that no man can touch. For beauty born of anger fades, but beauty born of sovereignty endures. This is why men remember women who walk away without anger for the rest of their lives. She becomes an archetype, not a person. She embodies the eternal feminine mystery, the silent force that cannot be subdued. And every future woman he meets is unconsciously measured against her, against the one who left without a trace of bitterness, leaving only silence that echoes louder than words. And yet the true gift of this silence is not the effect it has on him, but the transformation it creates in her. She no longer lives in reaction to the wounds of others. She no longer waits for validation from those too blind to see her. She becomes, in every sense, untouchable, not because she cannot be loved, but because her love is no longer given cheaply. The dangerous beauty of such a woman lies not in vengeance, but in transcendence. She does not destroy him with rage, she destroys his illusions with silence. And in that destruction, she births her own freedom. There is something profoundly unsettling about a woman who has mastered the art of silence. Not the silence of repression, nor the silence of fear, but the silence of sovereignty. A silence chosen deliberately, like a blade hidden in velvet. When she departs without anger, her quiet becomes an entire language. It says more than confrontation ever could. It whispers to him, I owe you nothing, not even the satisfaction of my fury. Jung understood that power often hides in what is unspoken. The unconscious does not respond to noise, it responds to symbols, to absence, to shadows. And so the silence of a woman leaving is not emptiness but symbol. It becomes the archetype of the untouchable feminine. The anima once projected onto her by the man withdraws, leaving him shattered in the vacuum. He no longer sees her as just the woman who shared his life. He sees her now as a force, a mystery, a presence that lingers even after her footsteps fade. Anger, after all, is predictable. Anger reassures him that she still burns for him, that he still matters enough to ignite a fire. But when she walks away without anger, she reveals that he has lost something far greater than her presence. He has lost her belief in him, her willingness to invest her soul's energy. And this realization is not just painful, it is devastating. Because once a woman withdraws her faith quietly, there is no battlefield to return to, no argument to reopen. The door has not been slammed, it has simply dissolved. For him, this is annihilation. His ego is forced to confront its fragility. No longer able to cast her as adversary or supplicant, he sees himself reflected in her absence, small, unsteady, incomplete. Men may act as though they prefer independence, but in truth, they crave the gravitational pull of feminine energy. They crave it not because it flatters them, but because it grounds them. Without it, they drift. And when a woman departs without anger, she does not just leave, she removes that grounding force. Suddenly, he feels the weight of emptiness pressing in. But for the woman, this moment is revelation. By refusing to collapse into rage, she steps into her highest form of power, detachment. This does not mean she ceases to feel, it means she refuses to be consumed by what she feels. She recognizes that her energy is sacred, and that to waste it on the unworthy is a desecration of her own spirit. She embodies what the Stoics taught, that the only true freedom is mastery over the self. You too have known this impulse, the burning temptation to scream, to demand recognition, to prove your worth in the heat of anger. Yet beneath that fire lies something even stronger, the stillness that says, I do not need to be seen to exist. I am whole already. When you choose that path, you step beyond reaction. You enter the realm of the sovereign feminine, not the one who pleads, not the one who fights, but the one who walks away in silence, carrying her dignity like a crown. This act unsettles him because it is final in a way anger never could be. Anger can be soothed, debated, even rekindled. Silence is irreversible. It is the closing of a door that no key can unlock because the lock no longer exists. And the man, left with nothing but echoes, begins to project his shadow onto her absence. He wonders if she ever truly loved him, if he misread everything, if she was always this untouchable spirit who only lent herself to him for a season. His ego gnaws at itself, desperate to rewrite a story that no longer belongs to him. The woman, meanwhile, undergoes transformation. Each step away from him is a step deeper into herself. She discovers that she was never dependent on his recognition. It was only a shadow play, an illusion her wounded self once believed. By withdrawing without anger, she integrates this shadow, transforming it into strength. Jung would call this individuation, the weaving together of all that was once fragmented into a seamless wholeness. Her beauty deepens in this process. It is no longer the beauty of youth or seduction, but the dangerous beauty of self-possession. Men sense it instinctively, this aura of untouchable power. It draws them and repels them at once. They long to possess it, yet they fear its independence. For it is the kind of beauty that does not beg, does not bend, does not barter. It simply exists, radiant and complete, indifferent to whether anyone else acknowledges it. And this is why the image of the woman who leaves without anger haunts men for years. She becomes the ghost of what cannot be regained, the archetype of the feminine soul that slipped beyond reach. He may try to replace her with noise, with conquest, with distraction, but none of it erases the truth. The silence she left behind is louder than any argument he will ever hear. The woman who departs without anger carries within her the rarest form of strength, not the strength to fight, but the strength to release. She does not dramatize her exit. She does not hurl words that will later be regretted. Instead, she walks away with the grace of one who has seen the battlefield for what it truly is, a place of shadows, projections, and illusions. She has no desire to linger there anymore. Her silence is not emptiness, but completion. It declares that the story has ended, even if he refuses to acknowledge its final chapter. For the man, this silence is a mirror that he cannot bear to look into. All of his defenses, pride, dominance, distraction, fail in the face of it. He cannot fight what does not fight back. He cannot manipulate what refuses to respond. He cannot soothe his ego with the thought that she still burns for him because her quiet withdrawal extinguishes that fantasy. And so he begins to spiral, searching for meaning where none is offered. Jung described this state as the confrontation with the unconscious, where the illusions of the ego collapse and the hidden fears emerge. In her absence, he encounters his shadow, his fear of inadequacy, his terror of irrelevance, his dread of being forgotten. But for the woman, this moment is a rite of passage into sovereignty. To leave without anger requires discipline, a mastery over the self that few ever achieve. It requires her to resist the intoxicating pull of drama, the ego's hunger to be heard, the wounded child's craving for recognition. Instead, she chooses the higher path, the path of individuation, where wholeness is no longer dependent on another's gaze. She discovers what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This strength manifests as an aura, a presence that lingers even in her absence. It is what makes her unforgettable, not because she demanded attention, but because she withdrew it. Men remember the women who leave quietly because their silence cannot be explained away. It becomes a haunting, a psychological imprint that time cannot erase. And the more he tries to replace her, the more he realizes that the mystery of her departure follows him everywhere. Do you see how dangerous this beauty is? It is dangerous because it is free. It is the kind of beauty that does not seek permission, that does not crave validation, that does not fear solitude. It is beauty born from self-possession, from the knowledge that love offered is a gift, not a chain. When a woman embodies this truth, she becomes untouchable, not because no one can approach her, but because no one can control her. The irony is that many men only begin to grasp her worth when it is too late. Her calm exit triggers a collapse of their illusions. They remember her laughter, her tenderness, her patience, but all of it is colored by the final image of her leaving without a word of anger. That image becomes archetypal, the vision of the eternal feminine slipping away into the horizon, untouchable, serene and sovereign. It is no longer her they long for, but what she represents, the unattainable, the mystery, the freedom they could not hold. And while he wrestles with regret, she evolves. She learns that walking away without anger is not about him at all. It is about her. It is about reclaiming her energy, her dignity, her life force. It is about refusing to be reduced to a reaction. In that choice, she births herself anew. She becomes the woman who no longer negotiates her value, who no longer wastes words on closed ears. Her silence becomes the boundary that no one can cross. This transformation is what makes her presence radiant, even long after she is gone. Others feel it instinctively. This aura of inner calm, this beauty that is dangerous because it does not beg. It is the kind of beauty that comes not from being admired, but from being sovereign. It is what Jung might call the integration of the shadow, the moment when what was once wounded becomes a source of strength, and what was once fragmented becomes whole. And so, the story of the woman who leaves without anger is not about revenge, nor is it about punishment. It is about liberation. It is the story of a soul choosing itself over the endless hunger of another's ego. It is the story of a woman stepping fully into her power, not by shouting, but by walking silently into her own future. And that future, untouched by bitterness, glows with a beauty that no man can ever forget. The dangerous beauty of such a woman lies not in what she takes away, but in what she discovers within herself, the truth that she was always enough, with or without him. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.